color, sky upon the sea, green, the taste of dill, memories of a dream, the burst of flaming roses, red, passionate and free, cream, a neutral place, we're finding common ground, the warmth of mauve, comfort and calm, gold, a place where dreams are glowing, colors of the heart.
Well, welcome to Abstract Art Behind the Scenes. Tonight, the theme is spatial clarity. And I made up that phrase myself. And you might wonder, what do I mean by spatial clarity? Well, spatial has to do with space, and clarity has to do with something being clear. So the idea that you look at a painting and it's on a picture plane, the canvas, and it's divided with shapes in a very clear way. So you see the shapes on the canvas and you see that there's a clear pathway that the shapes are making. Paintings that are defined with a variety of shapes and different sizes, different values, that is basically the idea of spatial clarity. Now let's say you have a chair and you're looking at the slats on a chair. Well, those are considered positive shapes. What are the negative shapes then? Anybody?
The space between the slats.
Exactement. All right. So basically, when we're looking at shapes, sometimes we're looking at a shape that we recognize, and sometimes we look at shapes that we don't recognize. But they are the in-between shapes or the negative shapes. I like in-between a little better, but most artists and art teachers talk about it as positive and negative shape. So I am going to start with a picture here on the share screen that shows no clarity and no spatial designs in the shapes. And my aunt knows this picture. So hold on.
Oh. Oh boy.
Now, this is a very special picture. Can
Like
you
the
find,
cat.
Yeah.
can you find the cat?
Yes.
You
Yes.
can see the cat. Okay. Well, we happened to have a leak in our from our bath, and Michael proceeded to throw everything from the closet onto the bed. And the reason why I'm showing this is, first of all, I love our cat Eddie, and it's always fun to show pictures of Eddie. But second of all, it's about clutter. And this particular class is about decluttering the mind. The particular artists that we're talking about, the featured artist and also one of the artists from Sustaining Arts Gallery, their works do not have clutter in them. They have a lot of feeling of space. And I was thinking to myself, after I cleaned this up, because we couldn't even go to sleep without this cleaned up, right? What if I were to go into the garage, find a beautiful wall, put up a painting, and then arrange around that painting my exercise cycle and all the things for exercise, and then enjoy the painting while I'm doing the exercise. And that would give me some incentive to clean the garage. That's my next project. Hey, we say this every year, so hopefully it will happen this year. So basically, what I'm saying with putting this picture up is we want to move away from clutter. So let's go to the next slide.
I love your cat.
Thank you. Eddie is adorable.
After
The
me.
featured artist tonight is Kenzo Okada. Kenzo Okada was born in 1902 and in Yokohama, Hama, Japan, and he died in 1982 in Tokyo. However, he loved the United States, and he came here and stayed here for many, many years, became a citizen in 1960. So I'll give you a little bit of the background. He was immersed in Japanese culture, of course, in Japan, but he often yearned for all things Western. As soon as he learned about Paris and he learned about America, he wanted to understand the way those cultures worked. He wanted to see a different way in the world from the way that he was exposed to in Japan. He was born to an affluent family, and at a young age, he wanted to become a painter. Although, like many artists who became well known ultimately, their fathers did not approve. So his father did not approve. He was a successful industrialist, and he urged him to pursue a more practical career and get into the business with his older brothers. Well, his father died when Kenzo was in his early 20s. And in some ways, it was not easy for him to say this, but he had to admit that it freed up his life because he didn't have a father who was expecting other things of him, and he could become the artist he wanted to become. Well, when he was very young, he actually um, loved the foundation that he got when he was in Japan. Here is a quote from him that's pretty much paraphrased because his English was not really sound. This is a 1968 interview with Forrest Selvig, and I'm going to be talking about some of the ways he feels about life through that interview during tonight's talk. I quote, "I look at beauty that came from my foundation when I was around 10 years old. It is a very wonderful thing for children to be with nature. This is most important. Next most important is having the chance to look at tradition. You know, making decorations for festivals over many years. And you know what else I like? Is Japanese Pure House. So I'm going to show you Japanese Pure House. It's something that I just learned about, and it's really interesting. Pure House is a kind of architecture that was made in Japan, or it was a name for architects. So, or a group of architects, I should say. I think this is really fascinating. Reminds me a little bit of Frank Lloyd Wright. I mean, having something protruding away from a strong structure. And notice that the concrete has little dots on it. It's got kind of a texture and a pattern. And as we go to the interior, I love this particular picture because it's almost like a painting. The way the shapes are so beautifully laid out and the diagonals being so dynamic. And here's the inside as well. Much space to be had. Even though it doesn't necessarily look practical in some ways, you can see that there's so much space in this room and a beautiful shape for the sink area and big open windows. So the idea that in Japan, it was important to be not cluttered, to have, even to use small spaces in a way that were not cluttered. So in 1922, Kenzo enrolled in the Tokyo School of Fine Arts. There was, however, a division in that school between Eastern and Western art, and he chose Western art as his course of study. He learned technique in painting oils, he learned about Western history, and he learned about anatomy. But just 2 years later, he had such a fascination with Western art that it led him to Paris. I don't know what the date is of this next painting. And I don't even know what it's called. The only thing I know is that it's a boy, and it was about 31 by 23 inches. And he was very influenced by the artists of his day. We're talking late mid to late 1920s, so he was influenced by Picasso, Matisse, Chagall, lots of different artists from that time period. Here's a quote from him, paraphrased. It was just like I was in Japan all the time. I was a young bird in a cage. And when I got to Paris, I was out of the cage and I saw a world that was very wide and very strange and very changed. That was my wonderful experience. Louvre, for instance, I could feel, but I couldn't understand. I was very lonely and kind of sad. But after many years, I think, oh, what a wonderful experience I had in Paris. So here's another one, and called Two Girls with a Flower Vase, and it's 29 by 23, made in 1939. Now, this is quite a bit after he was in Paris, but I wanted to show the influence of Paris, and I could not find that many works of art of his that were influenced by that trip. When he was there, he learned from this man, Leonard Fujita. This is a self-portrait, and can you find the cat?
The cat.
Yeah, it's in his lap, right?
Yeah,
Oh,
Oh, yeah.
this is Find the Cat Night. so, so anyway, I thought that this was a great painting. Look at the flatness, the flat quality of the space. Even the robe doesn't have a lot of feeling of roundness to it on his body. There's just a sense of flattening the picture plane and beautiful coloration that's quite subtle. Not really, really strong colors except for the bits of red. And you see some almost black and white, but a lot of the colors are more like tints or tones. A tint meaning that it has white in it. A tone that the color has gray in it. Beautiful feeling. Leonard left Japan to settle in France, where as a prolific painter, he quickly became a darling of the Parisian art world. Living through both World War I and II, Fujita painted a range of subjects, from cats and beautiful women to soldiers in battle. Okay, so Kenzo had very little money. He came back from Japan eventually because he had been getting sick, living on the street. However, even though he wasn't feeling great, he was very impressionable. He took everything in. And he did not paint a lot in Paris. However, when he got back to Japan, he really started painting a lot. So, 1927, he was back in Japan and he was continuing to use an impressionistic style to paint landscapes. He taught in universities. But when he returned, he was a little bit frustrated after a while. I guess for 20 or 30 years he painted there. And he said, my art group was composed primarily of artists who had experience with the West, like me. In Japan today, I find that almost all artists belong to some part of a group. I don't like that. An artist is not like a member of some big company. I'm very sorry that it's that way. The artist should be more independent. He showed in a very fine gallery in Tokyo and continued exhibiting there until 1935. But his feelings were very changed during the war. This is a painting of Mark Rothko, right? And this is showing that he's going to be making a shift. He says, I painted in the country, looking at nature. I returned to Tokyo and I started to go into my imagination again. I am very romantic. In Japan, artists could not paint except to just illustrate the army and the navy during the war. So he was kind of a little bit in hiding. And he actually said that he painted landscapes, nude girls, and some paintings like Botticelli. But after that, he felt dissatisfied with the Japanese contemporary art and he left for New York. Now, this was after the Japanese internment camps in the United States. If anybody knows when those stopped, I would be interested. But I believe, he got to the United States in 1950. You know something? In the Facebook group, if you ever find out, if anybody wants to look that up, please put that information in the Facebook group sometime, Abstract Art Behind the Scenes. Anything that you want to share that you find out that you want to put in there, it could be more pictures of the artist I'm talking about, it could be facts about them, or even your own artwork would be great. So he says, before I came to the United States in 1950, I didn't even know about abstraction. So apparently, he really didn't know much about what was going on in New York until he hit the scene. And that makes sense because in 1950, that movement of the abstract expressionists was just starting to gain a little momentum. This is the work of Mark Rothko. This is called Number 9, 1948 it was made. And this was part of a movement, as we can say, another group of artists, just like groups in Japan, who were dubbed as being the abstract expressionists, who were color field painters. They would paint a field of color, and it could have variation in it, but the overall feeling was a certain kind of pattern, or a certain type of warm color, or cool color overall. And so this is what Kenzo was starting to see. He also saw the work of Bradley Walker Tomlin. This is also called Number 9, in praise of Gertrude Stein, who was a collector of art in Paris. And this was made in 1950. What do you see in here that could remind you a little bit of Japan? Anybody?
Some of the black things look a little bit like Japanese characters, and actually even some of the white a little bit.
That's what I'm thinking. There's also this flatness to it, right? So I'm going to go on to the next one here, which is another example of color field. So though these three are color field paintings, meaning the overall design is similar to each other. And yet there's a flatness and it's abstract, interesting shapes that are within them. And this one here is 1951, made by Clifford Still, an American painter, as well as Bradley Walker Tomlin and Mark Rothko. This is a weird title, DPH 131. Nice, interesting shapes. You'd think, well, why would I want to look at that much blue? But we're not going to talk about his work right now. We're going to keep moving on. At least it's a really interesting movement around the edge of the painting, and I can never get tired of blue.
Beautiful.
Isn't that amazing?
Oh.
So Kenzo says, so my trouble was that when I was in Japan, I was always thinking about Western things. That trouble is gone because I am here in the West. And step by step, every year, my feeling was, oh, I'm Japanese. And I was sort of haunted by Japanese traditions. And the feeling always came out that I'm going to be Japanese and do everything like Japanese without even trying. But actually, this is a wonderful thing. So I am so grateful to get here because, well, before I came here, I didn't think much about Japanese things, old things, and things of today. Isn't it interesting how he comes from Japan, he comes to this country, and as soon as he leaves Japan, he wants to take with him all of that beauty from Japan. But when he was there, all he could do was think about coming to the West. So I think that's very interesting. And it makes me think of trips I've taken where when I come back to the States, I look at everything around me so differently. This is called landscape. Blue, it's just a landscape. And I don't even think it had a title. I just called it landscape myself. And it doesn't even have a date. But I was thinking because it's one of the earlier works that look more abstract and still has some sense of figurative in it, things that we can recognize, that I would put it first. And this is very big, 72 by 65 inches.
Wow.
That's
It
pretty
almost
big.
looks like it could be paper.
I know,
you
it
know.
looks like collage.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's so relaxing.
One of his works are oil, right? So he made it feel like collage, even though it was oil.
Yeah.
So let's go to the next here.
It's stunning.
Isn't that stunning? And this one is called Banner. It was made in 1956. And I really enjoy this one, partly because if you take one color in this and you look at how many ways it is subtly expressed, it's just amazing. Take one color and tell me how you move through the painting. Anybody?
Blue. Khaki.
Khaki. Yeah, and how does it change, Etty?
Different tone, different values.
Right.
I don't
So
know.
slightly different color, but similar, right?
Yeah. It's relaxing.
Yeah. Oh, and there's a reason why it's relaxing. Can anybody say why?
Khaki.
It's a lot of
Horizontal.
It's what?
Horizontal.
Yes. When something's more horizontal, it helps us to relax.
No.
So what about the whites? How many whites are in this?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
It's about 50% white,
I know.
but we don't see that.
I mean, it's just that white has, I mean, like they say that Eskimos say that there's like 100 shades of white. If you're around white all the time, you appreciate that white has many shades. Or if you have to pick out a mat for your painting and you're painting, you know, the paper in the painting or the actual pigment is a certain white and you go, how am I going to find the white to match this? You know, it's not easy sometimes. So I just thought also the thing that's interesting is that if you look from the top to the bottom, so I'm going to show you here, from here to here, from here to here, here to here, all of these are different sizes, aren't they?
Mm-hmm.
Isn't that interesting?
Mm-hmm.
Do you notice any one of these being the same size width across the bottom?
No, the opposite side is so different.
It's just really interesting how he uses the shapes in such a way that we keep finding it interesting. And that is because he's not keeping everything the same size.
Julie, what is in the center of what looks to me like a fish? At the bottom of the painting, there's something in the center.
Oh, yeah.
Is it,
In the center, no, come down to the figure that looks a little bit like a fish to me. Yes,
right there?
yes. What is that?
What is it?
Oh,
Yeah, I can't discern what that.
you mean the
square-
red, the red dot? The red dot? Oh no, it's
Square.
gone.
What is the square?
You know something? We don't know what it is because it's an abstract. However,
Okay.
if you feel that it's a fish, that's fine with me. This may not represent anything in particular, but the one thing I know about him is that he looked at rocks and he looked at nature and he looked at sticks for some ideas of what he would form in his paintings without actually copying a landscape in front of him necessarily.
And how big is this one?
Okay, this one here is 71 by 80.
Whoa.
My gosh.
It's very impressive.
Again, it looks like shreds of paper in different shapes that he's glued on there.
You know something? I think the way he painted is he might have made layer over layer, some of them more transparent than others.
Mm-hmm.
And then he created textural quality.
Yeah.
Very beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
He also could have stamped. You know, you could take a stamp and put it on wet paint, or you can put something that has a texture and put it on wet paint and get beautiful textural quality.
Okay.
What's the medium, Julie?
It's oil.
It is oil. Huh.
Wow.
This one is called Often. It's a great title. And this is made in 1956. It's 63 by 43.
Wow.
Yeah, big. Now, let's talk a little bit about the shapes in this and where they're moving us. Where do you come into the painting? Anybody?
The minute you put this on the screen, I wanted to turn it 45 degrees. I just want to turn it.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's agitating me.
Oh no!
Everything's going to fall.
And why is it agitating you?
Everything's going to
about-
fall to the bottom of the picture. It's like an
Okay.
earthquake.
But
Hi,
it's
Julie.
vertical. It's vertical instead of horizontal. Julie, you just talked about horizontality,
Yeah,
which is fascinating. I never even
Yeah.
occurred to me that it would that it's that specific, that horizontal is relaxing.
yes.
How ironic or maybe intentional that the next picture is vertical agitated someone.
Yes.
Immediately.
Well, I think part of what's going on is we all see things differently in what appeals to us. And often with abstract work, we can love a work and ask for it to be turned. I can't turn it during the webinar, but you can take a photo of it and then turn it later, you know. But the thing is, we all feel satisfied with certain things. I think the painting has enough balance with it vertical. And I think we move around mostly because of the dark shapes and lines that the dark moves us through. And the lights move us through as well. But it's kind of quirky, isn't it?
Mhm.
And what is
Yeah.
it called?
It's called Often.
Often.
It's Colleen. Hello.
Colleen!
Yay.
Hey, do you want to say something about the painting?
I did. I wanted to say something about the diagonal.
Good.
So, we talked about horizontals like home base, it feels comfortable.
Yeah.
And diagonals that go the opposite of how we read things. So they go from right to left. For
Yes.
me, always creates like tension or makes me feel uncomfortable or makes
Oh,
me
isn't that a
feel-
great explanation?
Yeah, and it's called a sinister diagonal in just geometry. Ones that go from left to right are comfort zone, like horizon lines, things like that. And things that go from right to left cause tension. So it's kind of fun.
That's really interesting.
Yeah,
Thank you, Colleen. Good to have you on here.
thank you.
So let's go to the next one. This one here
Oh,
is Untitled, made in 1960, 32 by 27. And the reason why I chose this is because, first of all, I really appreciate the very subtle shifting of whites and cream colors. And I love the hints of warm. And also there's an interesting division of space, even within the very subtle changes of value. you know, like that left portion and the right portion, the values are very, very subtly different. Like it's slightly lighter on the left, slightly darker on the right, but it's just, the shapes really are like puzzle pieces in this. Anybody have a comment or two? I'd love to hear what you think.
I think it looks like an ice sculpture.
Yeah, a huge block of ice.
I see a butterfly wing.
To me, it looks like a figure, you know, with their, like a figure of a woman with her arms sort of cradling, as if you're cradling a baby, but there's no baby there.
Oh my.
I see a dog's head.
Me too.
Yeah,
A nose.
yeah,
A nose.
Yeah. I
the
see
nose and the whiskers.
Yeah.
Surprised that he was able to divide the painting in half that way, and it works.
Right. Is it really exactly in half or not?
Almost.
No.
Oh my.
No,
It's
not
a little
quite.
quirky, right?
Yeah.
Like
Julie-
it's a little bit of a diagonal halfway mark.
Julie, I see a heart.
A heart.
Oh, yeah.
Beautiful. I
Julie-
love that.
Julie, can you explain why so there's really saturated color, everything's kind of coming out from it. Why does it work though? I don't understand it.
I'll tell you why I think it works. If you think it works, I don't know if you think it works. Do you?
Mhm.
I don't, yeah, I do.
Red
Mhm.
or anything like red in a painting
Yeah.
demands a lot of attention,
Oh.
right? So immediately I see that red or red orange on the bottom.
Mhm.
But you know what also demands attention? Is something that's by itself. What else is by itself in this painting that you don't see anywhere else?
That diagonal.
The diagonal? I'm talking
Little-
about a shape though.
The little dot, the little dark dot.
The dot's by itself, and there's
Yeah.
one more thing that's really alone in this.
Green thing.
Hmm?
The lines at the top of the painting.
Yes, the blue at the top of the painting.
Eyebrow, like,
Very hard to see.
The blue is by itself. That blue area that is like the wings of a bird,
Yeah,
right? I'm gonna just put a red by it, right? Right there.
Yeah.
yes.
That particular spot is dark against light. When you have dark against light in one part of a painting and red in another, they balance each other out. Because the dark against light is a contrast of value. The red is a warmth or an advancing of color. Okay? So both of those things show contrast in their own way. And also another thing that can help is you have an area where somebody had said this looks like a dog. I think it was Nikki. And there's lots of texture there. If you have an area where there's a lot more texture and pattern,
Right.
then that can demand some attention. Okay? And it kind of points us upward. So it's unusual.
So Julie, there was I think one of the things that draws my eye up to the top of the painting is that that sort of triangular shape above the red that's gray, but it has a quality of red kind of coming through it.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Is it
Yeah.
right here?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
And so to me, it kind of ties the bottom in. And then because of the shape or the point of that shape that almost looks triangular, it points us up to the top. So it kind of brings you up to the wing or the eyebrows, as somebody said.
That is very astute, Deb. Love it, because I did not, with my unsubtle vision, even notice the reddish in that area. And wow, it is affecting it. And the other thing is that the orange on the bottom is not that bright.
Right.
If that were brilliant orange, there'd be no way, right?
No, it wouldn't
It would
work.
just be overtaken.
Yeah.
They're actually both subtle. I mean,
Exactly.
yeah.
The whole idea of this piece is just beautiful shape making, a little feeling of geometry, and a little feeling of organic type shapes, like, irregular shapes.
oh, could that orange little step stool there be any other color and still work? I'm picturing it in all different colors.
That is a great, great thought. Yes. It could be gold. If it were blue, it would make everything a little less exciting because it would still be blue, 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 right? Because it's nice to have the warm and the cool.
I was picturing green, emerald green.
If it wasn't too bright, it would have to be subtle.
I
Very
think that
subtle.
green, I think green could work because if you look in that same triangular shape, I see shades of green in there
Mhm.
also. So, you know, I think any color down below that kind of mimics a little bit in another place could work for balance.
These two triangles, they
Uh-huh.
feel very precarious.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're resting on their points, but it's not a solid, grounded kind of feeling for those shapes. And that way it gives it a kind of movement.
I agree. I agree.
Oh,
Very
yeah.
nicely said.
Purple.
Okay, so the next one here.
Oh,
This is called White in Blue,
Mm.
and it was made in 1961. It's 16 by 12 inches. It's
Mm.
tiny. But imagine if it were big.
Wow.
It's just interesting and beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
It's more simplified.
This one does look quite uncluttered to me. It seems
That's right.
quite uncluttered.
Completely. This one I was attracted to because it looks like a watercolor, but believe it or not, it's an oil.
Wow.
It's
Wow.
beautiful.
And it's called Paysage. Is that passage? What is in French? Paysage?
Countryside, isn't it?
Countryside. That's right. I should know this. Okay, 1965. And I really like this because, first of all, there's hard and soft edges. It's not all hard edged. I also love the fact that we have a small enclave of what would be considered the negative shape of all those little white areas. And the positive shape has more detail or more aspects to it that are full of, more coloration, color change, and value change. So that's more the positive shape. And then the negative shapes are all beautiful shapes and sizes. So any thoughts on this? I appreciate.
I see a human face staring at us here.
This could happen.
It's on the lower left, above the blue, and
Oh,
against
it's a
the
little
beige
face.
background.
It's a little face.
A little face and a bluish green.
Oh yeah, I see it now.
It's a cat.
It's like this.
It reminds me of water.
Yeah, I see.
Reminds you of water?
There's a lot of motion in this painting.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
it's horizontal and it's relaxing.
And
It's
there's
got both
movement.
of those things, doesn't it? And you know that if you're looking at something that is horizontal, think of yourself lying down, right? Very relaxing. If you are looking at something on a diagonal, think of yourself in a reclining chair, and you are alert to a degree, but you're still pretty relaxed. And then think of something vertical. You are standing to attention and you are alert. So it's interesting, that kind of dynamic and how it can make us feel. So I'm going to go to the next here.
oh, beautiful.
Isn't that lovely?
Oh,
This is untitled and it's called, oh, if it's untitled, it must not have a name. Well, we can give it one. Okay. This is 48 by 65.
Wow.
That is huge.
So Julie, I was thinking that those white areas at the upper part look like curtains blowing in the wind.
Blowing in the wind,
Mm.
gentle wind.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't it feel like tissue paper?
Yes.
Yeah, or very soft fabric, yeah.
Yes.
Rice paper.
He uses maroon, the color maroon twice. In the middle of the painting toward the bottom,
Mm-hmm.
that long elongated shape.
Right.
And on the right side, a small bit of maroon. There's also a dot in what looks to be a square where the first maroon is.
Yes.
A dot.
Yes.
And there's also an interesting line. I don't know, I can't define it, but on the right, the middle portion, there's something like a stripe that goes up.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that was
Right there.
Yes, if that's an accident, but there's color in that also.
Exactly. So isn't it interesting, Janice, how you're moving from that one color to another color like that? And it's moving you around in a way.
Yes.
Julie, you know what else I see in it?
Yeah.
The shapes are very continuous, even though the shapes and the colors change, there's a continuity, like a mountain slope.
Uh-huh.
And the squares line up. There's a lot of continuity.
Very astute, very nice. And you know why you feel that is because all of these shapes, except for maybe a very few, have the idea of a square or rectangle or a trapezoid or wedge. They have a very similar kind of aspect to them. And if you really want to think about what structure this is, it's almost like a cross, like if you think of, if I put a cross up like this, do you see that in this?
Yes.
A little bit tweaked, but you get that sense of a kind of cockeyed grid.
This one and the one before it, I want to interpret them as sort of like three-dimensional settings, like they make sense in 3 dimensions. Although the one before it, actually, there was a bit of a fight going on because of that like white space that was in there on the left. It looks like rock, and it looks like mist rising up from the ground, and the rock that's sort of on the right side looks like it's in shadow, but then it looks like there's some rock kind of slanting upward to the left, but then that white space in there looks like sky, and so it looks kind of impossible. So it really, it's almost like there's a little battle going on between like a two-dimensional sort of abstract pattern and like something that is actually can be three-dimensional.
So how did you compare that to this one?
This one, to me, also, it has less of a fight going on. It's more settled, So to me, it looks like it really is like a still life that's been set up.
Interesting.
And for me, it just reads like these shapes are just sitting on this surface that comes up from the ground about, like a quarter of the way or a little less than a quarter of the way. So it has this very settled feeling about it, and even though when you look at these things, they're not really three-dimensional shapes, so there's also that interesting interplay between like 2 and 3-dimensional.
That's interesting. I like the way you're talking about that because that whole band that's the lower third of the painting has a lot more detail in it than any other area, and what that does is it gives us our center of interest. It says this is where the most important things are happening. We want you to look in this area that has more detail and has more shapes, many more tiny shapes, right?
May I ask you a question from your artistic point of view?
Sure.
Is it often the sense of the artist that they start off not with something in mind? For example, he maybe starts off with a square.
Uh-huh.
Right. Okay. From that point, is there often a plan for what you want to include, or is it a more spontaneous gut level response?
I think that's a fabulous question, Janice.
Love it.
And I would tell you that there are two ways of looking at this. Some people don't ever want to plan anything. They just want to paint. And they don't even care if they understand anything about composition. And it so happens that sometimes they make a painting they love and sometimes they don't. But what I've noticed is when I'm teaching about composition, I know many kinds of what are called structures, like the cross I was showing you. Because I know those structures well, I can start a painting without anything but a color in mind. And when I'm painting and all the muse is in me and I'm trying to figure this out, the abstract can start to look a certain way. And I think to myself, maybe I'll use a grid structure. Or, maybe I'll use a cross structure because this is what it's starting to look like. But it's because I understand about composition, I don't have to know it before I start. And because I'm not looking at anything in front of me, it helps me to know something about these structures.
Okay.
Julie, can I make a quick comment?
Yes.
He has his own style in general. I don't see so much the New York influence, the French, or even the Japanese. It's different from any of them,
I know.
except it's so delicate that it has the Japanese kind of a delicate style. That's what he got. One more thing, none of the paintings are signed, or most of them are not, because
a couple are signed, but very subtle.
But look at this one. If there was a signature at the bottom, it would upset the balance.
I agree totally.
Yeah.
That's why I don't sign my abstract works often. I don't. It just upsets it, unless it's so subtle that it's a part of the painting.
Right.
All right, I'm going to go on here.
Julie, he's a little bit like Moreau.
You think so?
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a little bit there, I would say. This is called Windy Pine, 82 by 106.
Big.
And I would say in this one, another beautiful use of subtle color and also really nice movement that's in a diagonal and horizontal. And I love the way this whole piece on the left sweeps from the left over toward the right like a finger. Do you feel that movement from left to right? And then we have this wonderful separate rock-like shape that's light on the right. And it doesn't bother me that it's by itself because it relates back to the whites on the left.
Julie, I see a dog.
I see two dogs.
In that gray.
Okay, that's the comment then. It's okay. You can see a dog. I'm sure that everybody sees different things in this.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Ooh, I like that.
This is not Kenzo's.
Oh.
Okay, but I wanted to show it because I want to show off Usha Shukla's art from the Sustaining Arts Gallery. And I wanted to show you how this relates in shape to Kenzo's work.
Yes, beautiful.
So look at this shape of this one and look at Usha. Isn't it interesting how Usha's shapes are not as defined, right? But you can still feel the shapes coming from the upper right, going down to the lower left. And then the kind of marine blue-green shape on the lower right as a shape. And the upper left, a blue-green shape. And you see how delicate the balance is of those shapes and colors and variation. So I chose two of her works to share based on what Kenzo is showing, because I thought that she really has that sense of spaciousness. And also she adds to it the movement that he does not add, right? She has a lot of movement.
Hers looks more three-dimensional.
Yes.
And it's also oil?
Okay, this one is oil. It's called Strike It Rich. It's 24 by 24 as an original, and it also comes in metallic prints that are on semi-glossy surface, 12 by 12 and 30 by 30. And basically, I'm going to show you one more of hers, which I thought is stunning. If you love black and white and really strong imagery, this one is called Wait for Me, and it's 24 by 18, and this only sells as an original. But wow, look at the shape that she's creating here.
Wow.
At the positive. So you can tell definitely where the positive is, where the negative is. But there's lots of interest
Wow.
in the positive shapes. This is done with air, by the way.
Yeah, that's what she
Uses a
said.
big air machine and she blows the oil around.
And she doesn't use any brushes.
No.
Yeah.
You know this from one of the other videos.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, now back to Kenzo. This is called Stream, and it's 41 by 54. Does this have anything different in it from the other paintings that he's done?
Lines.
Yeah, all of those diagonal blue lines intersecting each other. There's movement there and activity that we didn't see before.
I wonder what it could
Texture.
represent.
There's like more texture to it.
The surface of a pond with fish underneath.
Yeah, it feels to me like fish. But what could that be on the left? Do you think that helps the painting or hinders the painting?
Adds energy.
On the left side?
It adds dimension.
It does. Doesn't it give us a sense of perspective? Like there's some kind of a pillar and we're at that pillar, we're looking out from a building or something?
It also like stops the energy of like what looks like water from like running out of the painting to the left. It sort of like keeps it in there.
It's like ice fishing.
I actually think that shape on the left, I would have eliminated it. Personally, I think it would have been nicer to have the blue extended all the way to the left.
And that's just a preference.
Yeah, of course. But I think in some of his other work, you see those clear shapes and it's like that vertical shape just kind of cuts it off.
Isn't it interesting how this particular shape on the left is so geometric and all the other ones are irregular?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Right? And that's maybe why it could feel a little off-putting. However, look at the coloration and the value of it compared to the area on the upper right.
Yeah, that's the only way it ties together. Really.
Well, there's one more small way. That there's little fish that are that color.
That's true.
And the little leaf on the bottom has, or whatever that is on the very bottom, has some lighter quality of shape.
To me, that looks like a person looking at the fish. But I want to say one more thing back to the horizontal, is that it reminded me of a form in nature. And I wonder why it's such a popular and wonderful form in nature classic. Looking at the sun set over the horizon or setting over the ocean, that's ultimate horizontal. And then you've got the sun. This is this one object on its own. And it's almost red. That reminded me of this form in nature that we see that's so ultimately classic and so ultimately healing.
Yes.
And it does have that horizontality. It has the shade, the shades of, it could be blue or, I mean, just think about that. And it often has this deep sun, that's this red object standing alone and all that horizontality. I could go on, but I want to.
Well, I appreciate your bringing out some of the things we've already talked about, Corey.
Thank you.
Yeah, I really am glad you came.
Thank you so much. This has been great.
So this one is called Work. Very weird name. Made, I don't have a date on it. It's 36 by 37. And I'm going to read a little bit from him. Kenzo says, this is actually very funny. It's something about the US that I find quite adorable. Last spring, we went to Spain for the first time, and I liked the country very much. A very different country. I enjoyed it very much, more than I thought I would. But it is too Spanish. And Paris is too French. England is too English.
I love it.
Germany is too German. Italy is too Italian. And there's too much Spanish style, too much French style. This is very bad for me. But in America, this is not so. They don't wear a uniform. And oh, that is wonderful. That is what I need. I'm American, a very strange, very funny American. I just love that.
It's really cute.
So this one's called Work. It clearly has a lot of diagonal and interesting, beautiful shapes and colors in one area, whereas very neutral around it. So what it's doing is it's saying this is a treasure right in the middle right here of this beautiful area. So I'm going to go to the next one. This one is called With Green. And it's made in 1970, 53 by 38. I'll just take a couple comments on this one.
Looks to me like a folded piece of paper, like origami or something in the middle
I
part.
agree. Can anybody tell me how he gets away with that blue?
With what, Julie? How
With the blue on top?
Because the green is such a strong shape. It looks like water, and it's like a little bit lighter going toward the left of that green shape. And so it sort of gives the feeling of light reflecting off water. So it's a very strong shape that is able to sort of counteract. And then actually, like behind that green water is something that looks like it could be a mountain. You know, you have that, and then you have the turquoise in front that looks like it could be a hill, you know. So because there's this sort of strong three-dimensional interpretation, I think it sort of counterbalances that blue stripe.
Thank you for that. I also noticed by what you're saying, Sarah, that when there's something psychological that takes our interest, it can feel richer and deeper in value psychologically.
Yeah.
Meaning that the top part to me doesn't have any reference to something that we recognize in real life, whereas the bottom feels like something we recognize. You know, like water or mountain or whatever. It just feels more like that. So that psychological component can actually affect the way we view the painting. All right, I'm going to go to the next one here. This is the last one that I'm showing of his work, and we're getting almost like color field painting. I mean, like almost one color. I mean, he's really influenced by these abstract expressionists in the United States and in New York. And some people say that he really never entirely abandoned figuration. And this is actually called A Figure, which is the strangest title because there's no figure in this. But the one thing that I can say that I really think was important for him when he was in the United States was to take this idea that the abstract expressionists had, which is to put emphasis on the subconscious, which becomes a conduit for his exploration of his cultural heritage. And so I'm going to read a little bit more of his quotes because they're so interesting, because I think you'll enjoy this. In Japan, if you say something so directly and clear, it is very dangerous for everybody. Somebody may lose a job. You are so very careful, like a diplomat, you know. But Americans are very serious. They make an appointment and say, "How are you?" and then start talking business. But in Japan, talking business is not so good. You talk of many things, and just before saying goodbye, you may ask, may I ask you something? And then you start talking about business. Too fast is not so good. Too many people are looking. So this kind of America is not good. But Americans are too good. That's the trouble. They have too much definition. No tricks. That's the American trouble. But it's very comfortable for me anyway. So Japanese people, also artists, are not having definition and are very kind of wishy-washy. That is also trouble. But the Japanese do well with other ideas. Now, I've lived in this room for more than 15 years, and when we're here, he's talking about his wife and himself, it looks like home. But Japan is home too. But all are very sensitive in Japan. The atmosphere makes it that way. I have kind of nervous strength in the United States, but Japan is not nervous. It's very sensitive, very delicate. If eyes are too sharp, we can't find anything. If before starting some intention of being creative or proposing an idea, it's best if you don't have too much in mind at first. It will never succeed. You need to go with the flow of what will happen next. That's my own added extra sentence. So for our last picture of Kenzo Okada,
I think
he's on the right.
Yeah.
Oh, on the right. Oh, okay.
He's in the middle of the slide.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and it looks like it's mid-career. Well, everybody, it has been a joy to discuss Kenzo Okada, and we had a special guest, Usha Shukla, tonight. I would like to invite you to put your emails on the chat if you're not already being invited by me, so I can invite you directly to more webinars. And I invite you to put different ideas on the Facebook group, Abstract Art Behind the Scenes, you know, ideas about tonight, even put your own paintings, just enjoy being part of that and let others know about the webinars. Love to get more people here because it's such a great thing we're sharing, and also to the gallery. So please let others know and look forward to talking with some of you afterwards who can stay. So have a wonderful couple weeks, and I'll see you soon.
Thank you. This
Bye,
is
thank
fun.
you.
Of dreams, dreams of art, a closer world, a world apart. The color wheel of changing hues.